It's time for magic. It's time for some Bioware magic. Or is that just bullshit? Because that's actually what, that's what Mark Darrah, former Dragon Age producer, has said. Mm-hmm. One of these cool things. Some of these industry vets just start YouTube channels.
Yeah.
So Mark Darrah, much of my channel is dedicated to trying to help people after me do things better. So we can stop putting positive names on terrible things. And it's time to talk about Bioware Magic and completion urgency, which is also, a funny thing, because you mentioned, when you brought up this idea to me, you talked about hockey stick theory and The Pale Beyond, the game that we are currently developing, and how, hockey stick, actually very relevant, how much of a game forms as it's during, sort of as production happens. So there's so much to dive into here, and anytime that these industry vets share their knowledge and experience, it helps all of us so much. Right. Bioware Magic, it's one of those terms that appeared. Basically, those terms that have been around for ages, they're used as a badge of honor, that employees serve esteem, reputability, and pride to cover up dodgy shit. Basically, it's just crunch, hope for the best. Oh, it actually turned out pretty good. Right, Bioware Magic, we're special, we're cool. That's how we do things. That's how a project goes. And then, oh dear, things expand, and now Andromeda's happened, and now Anthem's happened, and oh shit, we've basically tarnished the company name. Mm-hmm. And burnt through staff, brain drain, all those things. Now some of those people are off making the Nightingale game.
That's what happens when you rely on magic as opposed to process.
Yeah. So, of course, we've talked a bit about that Blizzard Magic, a bit of a holdover from the glory days, the promise has since faded. Now, Bioware had their term, but in reality, the phrase Bioware Magic and the pursuit of 11th hour cohesion has repeatedly been used to justify and excuse extensive crunch culture and mismanagement at the studio. In short, the idea of Bioware Magic is a much more problematic one than fans and potential new starts are led to believe. And recently, former Bioware executive Mark Darrah caused a bit of a stir when he took to YouTube to call Bioware Magic bullshit. Now, he was the executive producer on all mainline Dragon Age games before leaving December 2020 alongside Casey Hudson. And his video is as scathing as that statement would have you think. It drops severe criticism on Bioware's overall processes. According to Darrah, the development process is referred to as a hockey stick graph, where the bulk of a project's progress is almost unnoticeable, which denotes very slow start development. Darrah said, if you draw that line out, your game is shipping in 30 years. But toward the end of development, the developers tend to hit a pivotal point, where various ideas and nuances finally come together and the project actually shapes up into being something shippable. Bioware call this the tipping point, which essentially can happen at any undefined point during the developer cycle, and it's the Bioware Magic. Now, this is a terrible way to do things, because it essentially excuses things like mismanagement or poor direction with the belief that, it'll all just come together in the end. Which, the amount of anxiety that would produce is wild. How does your parent, like EA, even deal with a development cycle like that?
The idea of, this tipping point can happen at any undefined point during the cycle is just, okay, so when are we going to see, when's it going to be playable? I don't know. When it's playable, it'll be playable, it'll be good. Yeah. Like, well, when's it going to release? Whenever the Bioware Magic happens, you're like, okay, sure, fine.
And part of this is why I can't wait to talk about Pale Beyond Development Lessons, which, it's been a very successful and smooth production that has totally been informed by us fucking things up in the past.
Yep.
And this is what, how all developers can learn from what's going on. Darrah basically said that the hockey stick methodology, though, is a sign that you lack completion urgency. And that's really the thing. With Pale, we've basically always had completion urgency in a way, because it's very much like, okay, what are the lessons we can learn from the industry? And it's like, yeah, okay, shit.
Finish a game.
We don't need to think about working on the project. We need to think about working on the final product as early as possible. Mm-hmm. So there are miracles in the games industry. All of the tales we hear of games that somehow come out and achieve greatness despite messed up development cycles. But those are the exceptions. They're not the rule. That's the thing. You don't hear... within the indie space, you don't hear because they never come out. They never find their publisher or whatever, right? You never hear. A few stories in that. In AAA, they end up if they have enough marketing budget, they're big, noisy messes.
They have to come out. There's no world where Anthem doesn't come out. It has to come out.
Skull and Bones.
Yep, that's the thing. I mean, maybe that'll come out sometime. Who knows? But it's that idea of just I guess it's a survivorship bias in a really weird way that's kind of tilted on its end now because we see so many failed projects actually release, where we now get to see these burning wreckages of projects.
And then vets, they hold on to badges of honor.
Oh, yeah.
And, maybe they don't actually know what they're saying when they sort of give some knowledge to the junior developers. So Bioware's apparent reliance on that magic is basically just hoping for a miracle rather than actual good development process. And that's very much what Darrah's going on about. In fact, with how Bioware's previous offerings, Anthem, Andromeda, Inquisition, have been received, you could probably argue that it hasn't worked a couple of times. Now, a lot of people say, Inquisition's pretty good. And Inquisition certainly is a miracle considering what we know of its development. Overall, it is a good game. I don't think anyone's trying to say that it's a bad game, but it's just that thing of the Bioware Magic was a big failure for 2 of these games. For Inquisition, it was, by the end result, a success, but an extremely risky one that also is at the expense of maybe the game that could have been, which maybe would have had more.
Yep. And also the damage I imagine a development process like that does.
Yeah.
Where Bioware Magic that sort of comes together relatively early, there's a bit of crunch. You're like, okay, maybe that's sustainably bad, but for what we understand of Inquisition, it just wasn't.
Yeah. So if we go back to the hockey stick thing, that's probably why we haven't heard much about Dragon Age 4 and the next Mass Effect.
Indeed.
Yeah, this sort of slow and sprint approach to making them could very well, mean that these games are in the slow stage, maybe nebulous ideas with not that many connections. And basically, to give you an example here, right? So, and this is something that me and Thomas right now are grappling with in how we steer our own company. Because there's different parts in a project, and it's easier for an indie team, but it's way harder for a big team, and this is something we know Naughty Dog have had an issue with. Yes. So there's different stages of game development. Production. Your main production is where you need the most staff, perhaps outsourcing partners for more assets. It's a very common thing to do, by the way. I mean, we don't do it, by the way, but it is common. But then there's pre-production. And pre-production is really when you're scoping the game, you're forming the ideas, you're working out the characters, their arcs, and all of those things. Now, what can sometimes, I think, happen in these large companies is they have scaled up for production. Now, one of the things that is quite known about in the industry is that a lot of companies, they scale up for production and then they slash jobs. Now, if your team doesn't slash those jobs, or maybe doesn't slash all of those jobs, you end up in a situation where, okay, we've got the Mass Effect team, and they're fully production ready. They have all the engineers and the artists and this and this and this. But there's not really enough pre-productions being done. So you end up with all of these people making the video game equivalent of, isn't it the F-35?
Oh, yeah.
Because what I understand about the F-35, which is like a fighter jet, and pretty fucking badass jet, whatever, but it's had this thing going on where they kind of do all stages of making it at the same time. I forget the name for that production methodology, but one of the reasons, of course, is political, because that's lots of contractors with lobbyists providing jobs, stuff like that. Yep. Now, there's obviously inherent downsides to doing pre-production and production at the same time. And I think in a video game context, it means that, while your core creatives and maybe your engineering lead and all these, the real crack squad who work out what the game is before everyone jumps onto it, while they're going off and doing that, you've just got sheds full of people. And they're like, well, we're working in Mass Effect 4. We maybe don't have all the pre-production done, so we got to do something. So they're maybe working in things they think they need, and maybe that's why you end up with all this sort of content and stuff. But I think that means the projects aren't well shaped. And if you look at the development process of Anthem, you have just that. You have the technical people in Anthem making, some stuff that seems crazy cool.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it into the final game, because it turns out the one thing they failed was great pre-production and a really solid scope for the game. So, maybe that's a little bit of what's going on here. Now, as for Mark Darrah, well, he specifically called on current Bioware devs to stop using that term, stating that poor past development processes didn't need to be repeated. And remember, he's the main producer of Dragon Age, including Inquisition.
Yeah, I think there are very few people who know Bioware as well as Mark Darrah did at this point in time. So
don't It is bad process. It's not magic. Now, Darrah's complaints are not specific to BioWare. He points the finger at CD Projekt Red for exhibiting the same kind of mismanagement as BioWare, you know, and really a ton of games. They're having difficulty generating completion urgency early on in the process.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if you want to, like, for, I think what a more sort of digestible explanation of what completion urgency is literally knowing where the actual goal is. Basically,
okay,
that's it.
I think I can succinctly explain how it is applied to us. So our past game, which I don't actually have. Oh, wait, no, I do have the art for.
Yep.
There's some art. Yeah, you know, our past game, here's just some, you know, art that we had in a little promotional flyer. This is a project that was not super tightly scoped. What we'd done is we'd made systems. We'd made bits and bobs. But completion urgency was something that we had because we were like, fuck. How do we make the game? Oh my God, we've just blown 60 grand. Fuck. What are we going to do? Shit. That is the development process of this, which I imagine is kind of what it felt like in Anthem to some people.
Almost certainly.
For The Pale Beyond, our current game, it's a funny one where we did pre-production and then we kind of got sidetracked on a thing for a year, which is probably where, if Project 2 is what I think it will be, where Project 2 will have came from. But when it came to actually making Pale Beyond, you know, getting a publisher and all of that, we decided that instead of... There's multiple different ways you can make a game. But we very much decided to focus on getting playable, almost you could say vertical slice quality content fucking ASAP. So as an example, I just played a beta build. And barring one or two bugs, the beta build that I played, I would actually be confident selling almost right now.
Yeah.
Because it's like I played it. It's like, oh, this is a slice of the game. It feels great.
It's a game. It's good, yeah.
Yeah. And for us, we've had that completion urgency because we've been, you know, decently spooked about making the same mistakes again, especially now that we have a publisher. And, you know, we're not spending our money.
Yep.
We're spending their money. So we have a fucking job to do, which is develop the game for the publisher.
Yeah, it's kind of odd how spending someone else's money makes it so much more urgent and so much more important. You wouldn't immediately think that, but it's absolutely true.
I mean, yeah, in this case, absolutely. So we have scheduled basically our game, you know, sort of initially we were kind of doing things in passes up to certain levels of quality. And then at a point we stopped and we're like, right, we're going to reschedule one or two things. And we are, now that we have our, like, some more of our feature set locked in, we're just going to go 100% thinking about final shippable thing only, so that no matter what, we have the game at the end of the timeline.
Yeah.
And if there's, you know, if we're done early and there's other features we want to add, sure, we can do that. But it's very much been a, you know, just go narrow, do it excellently, because we've always had that completion urgency. Yeah. What can happen, though, with some projects is they can be really expansive and you just kind of get lost in the soup. And it's especially tricky with games that have a lot more systems and things like that, because it's like gameplay. When's your gameplay done? You can always juice it more. You can always refine your loop more. Or maybe you're in that weird situation of like, okay, we have all the game systems built.
Where's content?
Oh, God, it's going to take... Where's content? Or another thing... Oh no, it's going to take us 8 months of playtesting to refine this. And it's all of those unknowns. So I think the big thing about completion urgency is that it forces you to remove unknowns. Yeah. In the way that we've been doing things, it's like, well, this UX, like we're not just slapping in some dev art now, giving ourselves some debt to pay later. We're just doing it right now because of that completion urgency. Yep. It's so important. And I love the way Darrah frames this. And it's just one of those things like, I mean, yeah, as a new developer, we need to learn from the other developers. And you know, that's the sort of discussions we need to have. Now, as for how people are reacting to all of this, well, we've got David Gator, who's co-founder of Summerfall Studios, who are behind Chorus and Musical. Previously creative director at Beamdog Studios. Before then, though, 17 years BioWare as a writer and designer across Dragon Age, Anthem, and Knights of the Old Republic. And he had quite a handle on BioWare Magic. He says, Mark out there telling it like it is. BioWare Magic is bad process and a lack of completion urgency. Yup. One question is, why on earth would anyone compare such a terrible system to Magic? It's like how science can seem like magic to those who don't understand science. It's probably originated from those high up enough to have little awareness of what's actually happening.
Yeah, we can't understand how this happened, so it must be magic.
Because we are BioWare.
Yeah.
To them, I suppose, the way teams would get their shit together on a consistent basis, turn projects around, projects seem to be floundering into great games. Maybe it seemed like pure wizardry. Of course, it wasn't, though. The pivot point Mark talks about always came after many months or years of people further down the chain ringing alarm bells of, this is not working, do something. And they would, eventually. Crunch and desperation to make up the shortfalls. After each project, we'd have this big show of postmortems where we talk about what went wrong. We'd get our anger off our chest. Vows would be made and then quietly filed away and ignored. Because all the projects were successes. You reward success. Lead a project where processes were so bad you ended up having death crunch to the point where half the team left the company after ship.
Jesus Christ.
Well, did it sell well? It did. Yay, you're a hero. Clearly something was right. What's more, success meant those projects now became benchmarks. If it took X months to do Y, then it should take X, or, less, because this time we'll be smarter, to do it in this project. Never mind that X was only achieved through blood, sweat, and tears. There was magic at BioWare, don't get me wrong, and still is, I expect. The magic is passion. People love what they do and make huge sacrifices. Passion can be abused, however, and there's nothing even remotely magical about that. I mean, that's big. Now we've got Liana Kersner, creative director of Song of Sparkle Muffin at Boss Fight Games, industry analyst who's covered BioWare a lot for the past few years. I gotta send more love to Mark Darrah and David Gator, dropping truths about the BioWare Magic crud. Every exploitative/abusive boss I've had in game dev has two go-to references. Ken Levine is a genius and BioWare Magic works. Jesus. So crunch, monkey!
Two people, oh my goodness.
Yeah, and one of the benchmarks that we've tried to use it. I mean, it's this thing. There's only, as I really see it, there's only two people in my head who are like allowed to crunch. I mean, the game team. I guess it's like more one. It's Thomas, and it's like we're co-founders. We have skin in the game, so it's different. But like a leading indicator of scope needs to be cut. A feature needs to be simplified, something needs to happen, is if, our tasks are behind schedule to the point where we need to put more hours into the same amount of calendar time. It's like as soon as that happens, it's bam, 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 alarm bells.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be fucked. And when we're spending other people's money, we're spending other people's money on our first game. Mm-hmm. So, if we fuck this up, we're dead. Yeah. No publisher, rightly, if we fucked it up, no publisher would ever go near us. And if we can't do this, they shouldn't. And that's the sort of shit you've got to learn. And you have that thing when, maybe you're like, oh no, it's fine, I'll do a few more hours. And it's like, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yep.
We're borrowing tomorrow's happiness. Every, little anecdote possible we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it is always about a marathon, not a sprint, because you can't sprint forever. Yeah. And it's just, that's if you want to cross a distance, you don't sprint. That's basically the fundamental thing that works for everything. You can't exert more effort than you can put out at a reliable basis. Otherwise, you're burning through something that isn't actually there. Yeah. It's wild. We've got Tyler Lee, UI director on Nightingale at Inflection Games, who, of course, they're a big ex-Bioware, peeps studio. And, they say, we previously spent 8 years at they previously were 8 years at BioWare and just said, BioWare Magic, take 10 to 20% of your staff, crunch into a fine dust, add to taste. Delicious. Also, bit of a Kotaku oops, where Darrah said, hey, Kotaku, in your article on BioWare Magic, you said you reached out to me for a comment. How did you do that? I don't see anything. Oh, dear.
Who knows?
Unfortunate.
But there we go. Look, developers sharing their fuck ups is the thing. I know there's a few indie devs who do listen to us, so I also where possible want to share our our fuck ups. I mean, like, to be frank, like, our initial fuck up is at the stage where if YouTube couldn't save the company, it would have been fucked.
Yeah, definitely.
And that just means, look, completion urgency. I'd say to any new dev, take the game you want to make and try to either make something different, smaller, or try to make the thing you want to make smaller. Always go smaller, 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 smaller to what you can actually fucking do. It is always harder than you think.
Yeah.
And especially if you're somebody like us who's maybe fresh out of uni and you're riding high in the passion, you see the likes of Mark Darrah and you're inspired by what these people do and you have big ideas. Watch out, because, we fucked that up first time. But you can find an idea that matches what you can do in a way where you love it and feel like you're making zero sacrifices. Mm-hmm. For us, that is the Pale Beyond.
Yeah. I mean, here's
but
the
it took
thing.
a lot of pain to get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If you make it small and then you go too small, it's done, and now you can do something else.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not as big or maybe it's not as incredible as you'd like, but at least it's done. As opposed to do something that's too big and then it's never done. And then you're like, well, fuck, whoops.
And if you are a new solo dev or you are a newer company, what do you need? You need a shipped game.
Absolutely.
You don't need a bunch of faffing about, a bunch of start-stop projects. You need a shipped game.
Yeah.
Ideally with a publisher, but that could be really, really, really hard to get first time. And the way to get a shipped game is completion urgency. Really, at some point, I think should grab Thomas and maybe do a segment on this, because I think it is absolutely top-notch. Top-notch. So I suppose just look, thanks to Mark Darrah for, sharing his experience, for calling Bioware Magic the utter bullshit that it is. And obviously, if you're a consumer, you know the price. I mean, look, even, Mass Effect Andromeda, it had its redeeming qualities. I would have been happy to have bought some DLC in that world, maybe see where it goes. One of those things where maybe the initial game is a little bit of a wash, has its challenges, but they've built the game. Now they can make some content and have less chaos, and we can get good DLCs like Shadow Broker or Mass Effect 3 Citadel or something. Yeah. Oh, wait. The fuck up was actually so much all the DLC gets canned. So it's like everyone has lost. EA's lost. Developers have lost. BioWare have lost. And it's not because of any evil top-down scheme. It's sheer incompetence.
That is something I think we'll learn, especially through retrospectives of devs as we go through this era of games. In 5-10 years time, it'll be like, there'll be some game talk. It'll be, so what was the great villain of all of video games for the past 20, 30, 40 years? Incompetence and mismanagement. Not from any source of evilness, not from any sort of, it's purely just greed. It's like, no. Mm-hmm. No, because if greed were the motivator, they'd have done a good job. But they've been greedy and done a bad job as opposed to doing it actually properly. I think that's the thing. We'll look back and go, oh no, everyone was just really shit at managing projects, I think. But even then, like you were saying about the Andromeda and the DLC thing, so much of what I think worked super well about IP creation in the very early 2000s and the late 90s was just the fact that budgets and stuff are so small that you could make something small and then expand. Like how many game franchises now are massive blockbusters and they're fucking incredible. But the only reason they came about is because there was they had to finish a project and it wasn't all that good. And then they evolved through, oh yeah, is this great? No. Is it functional and it's out and it's okay? Yeah. Well, we can expand. We can deliver. DLC improves stuff like Prey Moon Crash, for example.
Yeah.
It's Prey was pretty good and all, but Moon Crash was fucking exceptional by most accounts. And then you even look at how the Devil May Cry series started. You wouldn't look at Devil May Cry 1 and think, how did, DMC5 obviously came after this. But that was just, they had this smaller, they made small games and small projects. And that's how we got to where we are now, as opposed to these massive, massive one-off projects that need to exist.
Yeah, and that sort of thing does my head in. I mean, I think about Pale Beyond, it's what am I thinking about? Well, we actually have a great asset in that beyond the game. And that is all of the tools and tech we made.
Yep.
Because now if we, want to move into more of a CRPG-ish kind of role-playing game, the isometric perspective, maybe take a few inspirations from the incredible devs at Supergiant, it's we actually have the tools and tech to do that. So for our next project, there's less risk. There's going to be the same completion urgency because it's, that's really a lesson that we learned. Yeah. And that means that, we can make one or two cool things. We can push forward, everything else as much as we can, have a smoother development process. And that's the thing that's that's exciting about kind of like, you know, trying to work within a niche. I'm now just imagining what if a different engine was forced on us. You know, what if it just was that thing of, as you said, those monolithic like one-off projects where it's like, oh, done, and you don't get to reuse, you know, you don't get to like, you know, share the technologies as much, and just all the bullshit. Because I think the one thing that will really kill Bioware Magic the most is something like an engine change where the tools aren't there, especially because they were going from off-the-shelf engines in Unreal 3, I believe, for Mass Effect, to Frostbite, which gets a lot of shit. I think it's probably great at doing what its engineers intended it to do, and now they're probably all screaming because of what it now has to do. So there's just so many lessons to be learned. I hope you guys found this to be an enjoying discussion. Mark, Darrah, thank you for sharing. Of course, you can check out Mark's video. You can also check out, of course, Mark's channel. One of those great things of devs.
Old dev game advice.
That's it.
Yep.
And oh, yeah, there you go. There it is, old dev game advice. So, good stuff, Mark. And we will see you all next time. Have a wonderful day.